friends. Welcome to episode 32 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian for 12 years and counting, I found myself asking the question, where is the podcast that will help me do my job? I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that the ideas expressed in this podcast are my own, and they do not reflect those of my district. When incorporating research, I always cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. This week, I would like to say hello to the listeners in India as well as Croatia. I would like to extend a special welcome to listeners Lisa in Arizona, as well as Margot in Virginia. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and your episode suggestions, either on Facebook or Twitter, or you can email me directly at schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I will be sure to send you a podcast sticker in the mail. Thank you, Librarian Twitter, today for introducing me to the following listeners. Amanda in Virginia said that she listens to my podcast when she's knitting and doing other crafts. She mentioned downloading past episodes and listening to those over the summer. I've described podcasts a little like Netflix for your ears. You can pick and choose the episodes you'd like to listen to, or binge listen and go back to the very beginning and listen to every episode. What's perfect is, during the summertime, for some of us, we have more time during the day to listen to those back episodes, during road trips, working in the garden, or on our hobbies, or if you're like me, doing housework. I was also excited to hear from Adriana from Texas. She is one of the growing number of listeners who are currently working towards their library degree and find listening to this podcast useful. Adriana also let me know that as a special education teacher currently working with students who have autism, she found the episode Burnout and Self-Care very applicable. The winner of the wonderful surprise this week goes to Janice in Odessa, Texas. Janice shared with me that her district, which is Ector County ISD, offers a podcast and pedometer program for professional development. Teachers meet on Monday after school at the local junior college track and are asked to bring their walking shoes, a smart device, and their earbuds. Teachers sign in, and if they don't already have educational podcasts on their device, there is a list from which they can choose. Participants get exercise, learn, and get professional development credits all at the same time. Afterwards, teachers fill out a form about what they learned and ways they would implement these ideas in their classroom or their library. Guess whose podcast made the list? I am honored and thrilled to learn that School Librarians United was included. And this is just the type of validation I need to know that there is somebody who is benefiting from these efforts. My next thought is, how can I get a similar program started in my district? I can't think of a more meaningful way to satisfy the district and your state requirements for teachers to participate in professional development throughout the school year and incorporate the essential element of choice and promote healthy living. The optics of this are fantastic. There is virtually no cost to implementing such a program. Janice said her district plans to resume the Podcasts and Pedometers program next year, and I immediately shared this with one of my principals, and I offered to assist should my own district ever consider such a PD option. I will say that the weather in Michigan is notoriously uncooperative when it comes to planning outdoor events, but I would love for this program to be considered. To tie in to last week's episode on summer reading programs, some very thoughtful person decided to tweet out a great piece written by Donalyn Miller titled, "The Key to Summer Reading: Invest in Children's Reading Lives All Year," on the Nerdy Book Club blog, originally posted on June 11th, 2017. But it is expertly written, and the message is timeless. I'll include a link in the show notes. I especially appreciate Donalyn's message that a successful reading program in the summertime happens only if the following elements are in place all year long: time to read, access to books, choice of which books to read, and finally, community support. If you haven't yet explored the Nerdy Book Club blog or Donalyn Miller's books, I highly recommend you do. And now, for today's episode, 45 minutes feels like forever. As I previously mentioned in my May episodes, I am well aware that our schools are all on different calendars, and I'm sure that there are listeners who have been on summer vacation for a week already. However, I am excited for this episode because it is not only relevant during the final weeks of school, but it can be used throughout the school year when you have been relocated from your library, or you happen to be corralling 2 classes at the same time because of testing, or there's a substitute shortage. Also, please keep in mind, and many of my listeners know this already, I do have an elementary bias. I also travel to 4 different schools, and therefore I have developed a dependency on digital resources because I really don't want to be hauling materials from building to building. I would like to think of the following as tricks up my sleeve. These resources allow me to respond quickly when I find out I'm being bumped to the classroom, or there are additional classes coming to the library, or, as it happens every time around this time of the year, we stop checking books out, and the classes still continue to come to the library. Because I've always taught a fixed schedule, and I provide release time for my teachers, regardless if the library is undergoing inventory or shelf reading, or, as I have described in one of my episodes, Book Bounty Hunter, the worst job ever, we're collecting books at the end of the year. I still have students coming to the library for their 45-minute visits. The difference is that we're not checking books out for the last 15 minutes. Nor are we making use of the collection because, as is often the case, we're simultaneously doing inventory and reading the shelves. As with many of these episodes, the show notes all have a link to the resources. In the case of today's episode, I've created a ready reference 1 page which will summarize the following suggestions. The key is to make the last few class visits meaningful. Not busy work, but significant because we are ending the school year, and it shouldn't resemble a daycare situation, even if that's what it might feel like sometimes. Stopping book checkouts for the year is never well received. I've had to defend this position to the teachers in my building before. It isn't a bad idea to have a rough idea of how many books are currently lost or presumed lost, damaged, and not paid for, and approximately the value of these books. Sometimes I will tell a class, hey everybody, we're missing 9 books from this class alone. Imagine how many books are missing from the entire school. It's usually in the hundreds. Explain to the students that the checkouts will stop, and this is met with disbelief. They are incredulous. It doesn't matter how old they are or how many times I've mentioned to them that book checkout will end soon because field day is coming up. My students cannot fathom the reason for a library visit if we're not checking out books. I am certain many of you have witnessed the following scenario, and I'm always reminded of this time of the year when I see something like this. Imagine you are shopping at Target or a similar store, and you happen to pass the toy section. And there is a child in full meltdown in a crumpled heap in the middle of the aisle, crying. But why can't I get a toy? And the parent, equally exasperated, explains, we need a gift for your cousin's birthday. Or they'll say, we need a present for your classmate's party. We aren't here to buy you a present. As you can imagine, this never goes over well, and every person who has ever been in that situation has been sympathetic, rolls their eyes, and says, been there, done that, got the t-shirt. I'm still thinking of a way to break the news to my students tomorrow because I have 4 weeks of this. And I would like to feature the following suggestions made this week in various discussion groups, and then I will walk through the list which I compiled to develop this episode. I wanted to start with Brecca in Oklahoma. I mention hers first because her suggestions are dependent on using your collection. I am aware that my assistant is currently methodically reading the bookshelves. and I don't want to interfere in that effort. However, these ideas are so clever, I wanted others to be able to incorporate them into your end-of-the-year lessons. The first suggestion that Brecca made was the flashlight story time. And depending on how much natural light you get in your library, this may work best with the shades closed or with some blackout paper covering the windows. Brecca used book fair money to buy a class set of flashlights and suggests a flashlight which only takes one battery. This eliminates the guesswork when it comes to replacing the batteries. Some ground rules will need to be set. You don't want kids flashing the flashlights in each other's eyes. And apparently this activity is a winner, and it tends to calm the kids down, unlike some other activities which tends to rile them up. The other activity that I really liked that Brecca suggested was a special last story time of your life to celebrate the graduating fifth graders. They select their favorite storybook, and they were given a label to place on the inside cover. My favorite book, signed, and it says 5th grade class 2019. I have to imagine this can be a somewhat emotional farewell in the library. And I would then remind the students that their younger brothers and sisters will see their names inside the books, and someday they will put their names inside the books as well. I'm aware of a similar program in some school libraries where students and staff are encouraged to donate a book to the library, and they can include a special dedication on the inside cover. Michelle in Michigan offered a great deal of resources that she's used, and I'll read them in their entirety, and you may hear some of these repeated when I create my list at the end of the episode. First of all, she suggests grades 3 through 5 use Upstart's library lingo. She also uses an origami center and an illustration station using the How to Draw books. And she suggests using the Connects and the Lego Challenge Center, the Ozobots and puzzles that she has. She also includes using her 6 computers for online searching, and she uses also the computers for coding. When she does whole group instruction, she will introduce the audiobooks that go along with the print versions. She also does class read-alongs, and the kids really enjoy it in grades 2 through 5. And this is fun because the kids are given an opportunity to read out loud. Michelle also makes use of a class set of K through 2 National Geographic magazines for kids when there is no book checkout. Kim in Oklahoma offered some suggestions. She does breakouts with grades 3 through 5, and those are really fun. With her younger students, they do extra stories and read aloud. She recommended using Go Noodle as well as Ryan and Craig's Storytime, and I'll go into a little more detail a little later in this episode. I especially like Kim's suggestion because she expressed the same frustration that kids keep on coming to her surprised that they're not going to be checking out a book. So she suggested brainstorming where the students can get books to read after their school library finishes checking out books for the year. And she said that when she and her students made this list, they came up with 11 places where the students could get a book to read once their school library finishes their checkout. And I think that that type of brainstorming activity is a really valuable one. Lisa in California suggested Cat's Cradle, and I really like this suggestion. And the more I thought about it, no tech and about $4 of yarn would get you through all of your classes easily. I'm going to date myself because I remember playing Cat's Cradle, I think between 3rd and 4th grade as a recess activity. And all of us had colorful pieces of yarn in our pockets, and we would show off our tricks to one another. And then we would show each other and we would replicate the trick. And when we moved the string configurations from one pair of hands to another pair of hands, we talked to one another. We had meaningful conversations. We could do this for the entire recess. And I'm thinking to myself, how could you possibly be unkind or bully somebody when you're doing Cat's Cradle? And of course, as you can imagine, there are a host of YouTube tutorials walking kids through step by step. And what's fun is this is the kind of activity that if we started at the end of the school year, it could very well continue throughout the summer and students would teach their siblings. Amy in New Jersey is working with Go Noodle, and many of you are familiar with Go Noodle. It's a movement and mindfulness platform used by, according to the website, 14 million students around the world. And she shared a link to the Go Summer program, which is going to keep kids learning and active and mindful. And the program will run from May 27th to August 15th. And she was happy to share out a link, and I'll include that link in the show notes. And I thought this was interesting as well, because many of us do use Go Noodle during the school year. There will be a Go Noodle Summer edition as well. As I mentioned before, Storytime with Ryan and Craig. I'll include a link in the show notes. I have some mixed feelings about relying on others to read stories to my students while I'm in the library. However, if I do the math, I've read 2 stories to each of my lower elementary classes for approximately 40 class visits to the library this year. Incorporating a video of this type of YouTube channel has several benefits. I'm not pulling from my inventoried shelves. When you think of all the sketchy toy unboxing videos that kids are watching these days, I would like to think that if a student of mine asked their parents to watch the Ryan and Craig story time, I would think that that would be a good recommendation. According to their bio on YouTube, they are, quote, a family-friendly comedians who read aloud children's books with silly voices, big emotions, and sometimes improvised songs. They aim to educate and entertain children, teachers, and parents, and promote childhood literacy. I will say this, and my students will tell you, I am no comedian. I'm not feeling threatened by Ryan and Craig. I would like to run through my at-a-glance sheet now. I've attached a link in the show notes, and I encourage you to make your own copy so that you can revise it. It is by no means comprehensive, but I hope that you can find something which helps you and your students in the coming weeks. As I mentioned earlier, I really try not to rely on using my collection, but the first couple suggestions do rely on our collections for material for these following lessons. First of all, as we mentioned before, the flashlight story time and the 5th grade My Favorite Book label on the inside cover, the How to Draw centers, and for me, I use scrap paper and little stubby golf pencils. I also recommend pulling your origami books and having folding stations. You can also pull from your poetry collection and encourage the kids to give poetry performances to their students. The next category of lessons we can do with our students are those which promote the public library. And as I mentioned in a previous episode, partnering with the public library is without a doubt one of the greatest resources. We've got one set of librarians handing students off to another set of librarians. Our students already have a great routine in place coming to the libraries. Why would we let the summer interrupt that routine? I like to demo the public library's website. I talk up the summer reading program. I always schedule a visit with the public librarian, and the teachers can pick and choose which time slot they'd like to come up to the library and learn about the summer reading program. I also will include time to show the students how to navigate the public library's OPEC and how to access the ebooks and the audiobooks. I also make sure to demonstrate to my students that they can check out video games as well as DVDs. And the other thing that I emphasize with my students, the public library, as we sometimes refer to it as the big library, is the library where they are allowed to check out as many books as their adults will allow them. And for many of the students, they find this extremely exciting. And I do emphasize when I teach this lesson how the public library and the school libraries are partners. We talk about how we are the same, but we also talk about how we're different. The next category of lessons that I like to teach during this time is how to promote summer reading in general. And we like to brainstorm, like I said before, all the places that you can find books for this summer. I did develop years ago something that I call a gem game, and I just use little tokens or little glass gems that you can buy at the dollar store. Another way you can play this game is also to have like a thumbs up or a thumbs down. And I generated lists of good choices and a list of bad choices over the summer. And the kids will give a thumbs up or they'll give a thumbs down. If we're playing a gem game, I created game cards, and half of them were activities that were positive and good choices in the summer, such as reading a book, listening to an audiobook, or reading to a brother or sister, or reading to your dog, or reading outside, or visiting the library, and came up with all these different great ways to encourage summer reading. By the same token, I also came up with rather disappointing choices in the summer, like you binge watched Netflix or YouTube, or you played video games all day and you never went outside to play. And we talked about activities which really won't get these kids ready for next fall. I also like encouraging giving the kids clipboards, and they walk around the collection. Mind you, they can't touch the books. They don't take the books off the shelf, but they generate reading lists. And just as we completed interest inventories at the beginning of the year, this reading list would be one that I would encourage them to take to the public library. I might take the time to photocopy some sort of list on, say, cardstock, and then split those down the middle so that they'd have sort of this oversized bookmark with titles that they have been adding. And that way, when they go to the public library, they have some idea of the kinds of books they would like to read. This week, Colby Sharp's newsletter talked about a fun activity that he and his students did, generating sort of a crowdsourced list of the best of, and I included a link in the show notes so that you could learn more about that. Another fun thing to do when we have students for 45 minutes is to play games. And the librarians on our Facebook discussion group came up with a great list, including library lingo bingo, Pictionary with book titles, board games, card games. Some of us have like a Dewey Decimal game or a genre game. And I developed a genre game and a Dewey Decimal, sort of a matching game. And many of us have ones that are similar. I also know that a lot of librarians like to pull out the Minute to Win It challenges, which are easy and oftentimes very inexpensive to run as centers in our library. Many librarians talked about using a breakout EDU with their older elementary students. The next category of activities to do during 45 minutes included the celebrations. The celebrations when a class has 100% book return. And I also included a link to the parody on YouTube called Bring Them Back, which was sung to the tune in Frozen. And I'll include a link. But many librarians recommend using candy or popsicles during this time of year as a way to excite students to bring all their books back and to offer a bonus recess. I will say that if you are going to offer a bonus recess, make sure that you go through the steps to talk to your main office, find out when the other classes are using the playground. Bonus recess is not uncommon during this time of year, and a lot of teachers have the same idea you do. And you may find that if you have bonus recess, you're going to be competing with a lot of other teachers out there, especially on a pretty day. The next couple suggestions for your 45-minute class period would be using the lab or the Chromebook carts. And this is especially exciting because in most cases, your testing sessions are over. And so whereas typically the labs and the Chromebook carts are spoken for during these testing windows, Now that those testing windows are over, usually they're available for anybody who wants to use them. So the following suggestions were made, and I'll add a couple of my own. First of all, using Flipgrid to make booktubing, Kahoot. Another suggestion, which I really like, is taking your kids into the lab and cleaning up their Google Drive. If they have created items for the year, teach them how to create folders and then drag their work into that folder so that when they start up in the next school year, they can create a new folder. I want to add a couple of links of my own. I like to teach website evaluation, and over the years, I have collected an impressive list of fake YouTube and fake websites. During the school year, I teach website evaluation, and I'll use these fake YouTube and fake website links with my students to a certain extent, but giving them an opportunity to really explore them can be a lot of fun and rather distracting. So the other link I'm providing as well are those of my keyboarding websites, and there's a drop down, and if you look at the options, they become increasingly more and more difficult. I encourage my students to do keyboarding over the summer. It's considered educational, and arguably, they're not getting enough exercise doing keyboarding skills during the school year. I also love to use this time to give kids the opportunity to explore the databases which we provide through our library websites. I also like to give the students an opportunity to explore their favorite author websites, and I teach them how to search for their author and look for the official website and all the different fun things that they can do to learn when they explore those websites. I also recommend, if you have some time in the lab, taking your students to a website called Wonderopolis, which is really fun, and the kids can explore different questions that students like themselves have asked in the past. This is an obvious opportunity to make use of your makerspace. This is where I am at a distinct disadvantage. I have never been included in the creating of or managing of a makerspace in my library. As I mentioned, I moved to 4 different buildings, and each building has makerspaces which are organized by a technician or somebody who's in the building all day long. So obviously, good time to use your makerspace, and I'll leave it at that. There are some outside activities which have been suggested, including reading the book Chalk and then taking containers of chalk outside and having the kids draw on the pavement. Another great suggestion somebody said was to read the book Rock, Paper, Scissors and then do the hula hoop activity. I've included a link to the YouTube on how to implement a hula hoop activity, and I'm guessing if you contacted your gym teacher, you could get a hold of the hula hoops necessary to do this activity. Another great outside activity would be making paper airplanes, and you could pull the paper airplane books that you have from your collection and then take those outside along with paper that's cut to work with the origami. I did include some fun links in this resource, and I love using flippity.net. It's a randomizer, and I use this often. And I really enjoy it. I've included 5 links, an A to Z randomizer for those of us who use an alphabet carpet. So you can click on the randomizer and it will pick a letter of the alphabet, and you can ask silly questions or use that as a way to pick who's going to play next. There also is a randomizer for the different months of the year, which when my kids aren't sitting at the ABC carpet, but they're sitting at the tables, I'll click on months and spin it, and that'll help us decide which group of kids are going to answer a question. I've included an icebreaker randomizer, and this is kind of fun because it spins and it asks a library-related question. And then I have 2 last spinners, and these are very popular with my students. I just call them favorites because it simply has a single word like favorite drink, favorite video game, favorite pet, favorite vacation. And the kids can give real quick answers, and oftentimes you can get through the whole class. And it's not hard to have just them line up at the board, and they can take turns tapping it and they'll answer to their friends. It's a neat game. Anyway, so I left those links there. On my computer, those are actually a tab on my toolbar. I've created a flippity folder, and when I drop it down, all of those are links that are there. I think it's really helpful. Last couple suggestions: have the kids help you clean out the library, or at least give them the idea that they're helping you get the library ready for the summer. Bring in a container of baby wipes and pull out books which really need a good cleaning and have them go to town. I have students who would love to sharpen pencils all day long, and we save those for that occasion. Sorting crayons. I am a big fan of upcycling crayon donations from the building and using those in the library. So I'll have them sort the crayons, and if the crayons are bitty or they're really small, I'll have them pitch them. I also have them check markers. So some of my students will sit there with a scratch piece of paper and check the markers, and if the markers are dried out, they get put into the recycle bin. And at the end of the school year, my kindergarten teachers routinely will give me their supplies, and I will find ways of using them in the library so that I don't have to buy any myself. I also will give the kids wipes, and they will clean down the shelves. Obviously, cleaning the shelves in June isn't going to do much good when we start up again in August, but it helps them feel like they are helping me, which I think is important. Lastly are my YouTube playlists. And this isn't a complete list, but I included the ones that I like a lot. I did mention Go Noodle, which is really fun. You want to put that on your toolbar. I have a YouTube folder on my toolbar, and many of these are drop downs. The first playlist is called Library Parodies, and somebody else put this together, but it's really well done. A lot of songs that are popular, and then somebody who's clever and can sing made them into library parodies. I included a dance party. This is on the young end, but I got to be honest, all of my students enjoy these dance parties. I included 2 fillers, and these are just fun, short videos, which will, if you have 4 minutes or 7 minutes or 9 minutes, will give you a bit of a breather and get the kids settled down and sitting before the teacher comes to pick them up. Phew. Well, that is a lot. And I'm hoping that in that list, you will find something that you can use to make the next couple weeks manageable. And I would like to thank you for listening today. I'm especially appreciative to the lovely people who left a review on Apple Podcasts. That was a very sweet surprise when I opened that up today. Please consider sharing this podcast with your fellow school librarians. And if you're in library school right now, share this with your classmates. Next week, we will be celebrating our son's 17th birthday, which is strangely less nerve-wracking than when they turned 16 and they both needed to get their driver's licenses. My next episode will be posted on Monday, June 3rd, and it is titled Gainful Employment. I hope you will tune in.